Welcome, everyone, to another panel discussion on post-election update for the astrological alignments for the rest of this year. Today, we're joined by Jordyn Smith, Nia Fyler, Michael Pinchera, Kim Marie, Ryan Evans, Marie O'Neill, and Michaela Kendall Villiers, myself, Robin Grabfelder, and Sue Hillyard.
So where would you like to start?
Kim Marie said you wanted to start with some slides.
Yeah,
Awesome. I've got to give you permission to.
Sure. I have one point that I would like to just make and start us off with. So, okay, so I'm ready.
Yep.
Ready. Okay, some of you may have seen this slide before. Welcome to everybody who's listening to this live and in the future.
I don't see your slide, Kim Marie.
Oh, what am I not doing? Okay, help me out, Miss Sue.
You might have to click what you have to click OK to what you want to share. There's a couple of things you have to choose it and then click share.
Yeah, I did. So
if you try to unshare first again and then try sharing again.
Have you fully enabled group participant screen sharing, Sue?
Yes. I gave her co-host permission. So there we go.
got it now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So if you follow any of my webinars, you may have seen this slide before. In the Jeffrey Wolf Green method of evolutionary astrology, we work with different evolutionary states of consciousness within souls. And this is just a loose approximation of where all souls on the planet stand, regardless of country, regardless of race or culture. And in the JWGAEA Green EA method, we always like to say that these evolutionary states of consciousness are not better than, less than. They're rather expanding states of awareness that we go through with many lifetimes of experience. And so you can see on your screen about 7 out of 10 people consensus. That means they consent to the current times that they live in. They follow the herd cow, as Jeffrey Green used to say. I have a farm background. And so they don't think outside the space-time they were born into. They're very influenceable, if that's a word that I maybe made up.
It says it, though.
We know what you were getting at. Can we smell what you're stuffing in?
And so individuated then says, thank you very much. I'm going to think for myself whether or not astrology is the work of the devil, or whether or not whatever statement is made out there is true or false. I'm learning to individuate and think for myself. And then that spirituated state of consciousness is where we can really step outside space, time, and understand timeless, universal spiritual principles, what EA will shorten into what we call natural law. And so we look at this, and sometimes what we have to be careful of is, because we're so aware, we think everybody else is. And so I put up this next screen to just let us actually see, and this is not, real rigid rights to standard, but I think you get the point. The majority of consensus, they're the ones that make the laws. They're the ones that create the rules and the norms. And just in case you're not aware of this, if you're somewhat new to EA, we kind of more or less say that that consensus consciousness is very Saturnian. Again, it works in the current moment. It works with wanting to be secure. It works with, following those rules. Individuated consciousness is more Uranian and Aquarian. And that spirituated consciousness relates more to Neptune and Pisces and that disillusion of boundaries and, again, everything else, etc. The reason I want to point this out to you is I didn't catch this before the election, but I sure am aware of it now. And this is what I want to really hone in on: mainstream versus right-wing media. Because we can talk all the issues. We can talk inflation, racism, the border issue, illegal immigrants, all that stuff. We can go in and talk all of the astrology aspects that we want to. But the bottom line is that right-wing media has now taken over the majority of what we call the news. And so I put an article here up on the top that I think just really is very succinctly telling this. And you are welcome to, take this and go research it and find it. And so it boils down to one thing. Kamala Harris lost because the right-wing media sets the news agenda in this country. And you can see down below in red, here's just a short list of them, from again, social media to quote unquote supposed to be media to podcast to, Elon Musk's Twitter. This is what constitutes the majority of what people listen to. 2/3 of the people in the United States get the news through right-wing media. Now, I'm a news junkie. I have 7 out of 10 natal planets in Sagittarius or the 9th house. 7 out of 10 in the Sag archetype. My background is bookkeeping, and I was a bookkeeper for a half a dozen newspapers in my career. So I come from the whole media background and never really stopped. And so I have watched this for the last 4 decades. And it was like, Kim Marie, ding, 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 where have you been as I am going through my hangover, depression, everything the next day? And it was like, oh my gosh, I, in my own consciousness and elitism, think that people are going to understand truth, think that they're going to get it. Well, guess what? They're being fed a steady diet of different stuff. They're being fed a steady diet of false news. And they take it for gospel. They take it as the truth. Here's another little detail for you. We all heard about, forgive my pronunciations. I make up words, as you know. The Haitians eating cats and dogs. That didn't start with Donald Trump or J.D. Vance. That started on an obscure post in social media that Fox News picked up. The same thing with Biden-Harris taking money from FEMA and the hurricane victims and giving it to immigrants. That started in right-wing media. Trump starts stories, but most of that big stuff that you see out there that he starts espousing, it starts in right-wing media. Now, one astrological tidbit that I thought was kind of interesting is Fox News started in 1996. In case you're not, don't have Pluto's transit memorized, Pluto was in Sagittarius 1995 through 2008. So this right-wing media really gained ground through the 15 years of Pluto in Capricorn. And we all know where Pluto was on election day in that last quarter of the last degree of Capricorn. But all that right-wing media stuff started through Pluto in Sagittarius, the whole truth versus lies. And then more started. And then they've just gained ground through the last 2 Pluto transits. So this will be really interesting for us through Pluto and Aquarius over the next 18 years to see if there is any type of rebellion on the left in the media. So Michael Tomasky, who is the editor of the New Republic, it's a magazine that started in 1914, so it's been there for a while. He basically bluntly says, if the liberal rich do not put as much effort into the message as the right does, then we're not going to get very far. So here's one paragraph from the article he wrote. Contemplate this. If you're of a certain age, you have a living memory of revolutions in what we used to call the Third World. Question: what's the first thing every guerrilla army, whether of the left or right, did once they seized the palace? They took over the radio or television station first. There's a reason for that. So I just wanted to put this out here as a big picture foundation as we reflect on this election. And I think that it may be also contributing to why, for the third time in a row, Donald Trump was underestimated in the national polls. They talked about this when Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. They talked about it when Biden won by the skin of his teeth, although he had 7 million more in the popular vote. Electoral College, another story. But it's still, for the last 3 elections, polling has underestimated Donald Trump. And I think it comes directly back to this situation. All right, that was what I wanted to just say to everybody. That was my big aha waking up after November 5th.
Thank you, Aunt Kim Marie. That was great. I didn't even think about Pluto and Sagittarius.
Yeah, that was very good. Very
Yeah.
good.
Comments? Anybody else? What do you guys think?
Kim Marie.
Kim, I have a question for you.
Oh,
Yes.
Go ahead, Jordyn.
well, I was just thinking of how when Fox News came out in 1996 in Pluto and Sag, then Pluto enters Capricorn in 2008. That is a Jupiter cycle. That's 12 years. It's that time span. And then I was reflecting on what's going on right now as Pluto's at 29 degrees and we have a Jupiter retrograde, and also we're in like the pre-shadow of Mercury retrograde, which is going to be a mutual reception of each other. So I'm kind of, my mind is going like, so I'm really glad that you brought this up.
Yeah,
Well,
this
not
is
only, if I may, not only, 1996. So remember, we had the Uranus Neptune conjunction in Capricorn in 1993. So they were already part of that whole Capricorn concentration for the consensus control of life in general, let alone the whole media, if you just look at it that way.
Yeah. I remember around that time watching my father become brainwashed by talk radio when he would drive for work.
Oh, I grew up in rural northern plains of America, farmers. I was the oldest of 3 girls. And my joke is I didn't get off a tractor till I was 26 years old. But my parents were lifelong Democrats. I was raised that way. And so then I watched them get brainstormed by family members through Pluto and Capricorn. And now I can't even talk to my dear spiritual mother about it.
well, and you know that Pluto is getting ready to go out of bounds.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and it's going to be for 10 years.
Out of bounds for 10 years?
Hmm?
It's going to be out of bounds for 10 years?
For 10 years, from what I understand, yeah.
Everything takes long with Pluto, don't you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be 10 years, and I think it's
And it's just slightly, it's just slightly, but this has happened before, where it gets just a few minutes out of bounds, but it's still out of bounds.
Yeah, yeah.
So let the destruction begin.
Yeah,
Right.
well, but when you look at this from the big macrocosm picture, I mean, everything that Kim Maria said is so true. And we have to look at it from the big picture. What is the intention of the universe for us as humans? And we have to evolve. Unfortunately, because we have not done a lot of internal work, I mean, we've got the 70% of the population that is pulling in one direction. We end up as a whole having to suffer more so that we can evolve. I mean, and evolve we will, but it's just unfortunate that we have to go through so much pain and suffering. But we signed up for this, guys. We signed up to be here at this time for a reason. We signed up to be part of the 20% or the 10% for a reason. And
Good message.
Mhm.
Well, and
I have a
last,
question for Kim.
Yeah, that's true. We are
Brian wants to speak. Let me just say one thing in regards to this, because it's still on the screen. I was at a social function last night with family on my husband's side because he had a sister come visit elderly mother. I'm sitting around with a group of people. There were about 10 of us. Let me tell you, I'd say half of them were consensus, and they all voted for Kamala Harris. So that consensus does get that truth, and I'm just going, wow, this is real interesting. So we can't just, do an absolute that consensus doesn't understand truth. It can, but it's what is the consensus being fed? What's the perception of what they're being fed?
Yeah.
And,
Right.
corporate.
How do we change it? That's the thing is that I've seen those same articles and since the election, Kim Marie, and then I think I tried my hardest to tell people what was happening, and I felt like it wasn't enough because I don't have a 500,000 followers, but yet Joe Rogan is preaching bullshit to people, and they're eating it up. So
And Elon Musk.
is amplifying it all.
Well,
So
one more
so we need to figure out how we can change it, and that was the whole premise of those articles in my opinion was.
Sure. So, Brian, you're next. Okay. One more, I got one comment. Thank you. So Jeffrey Green would always say we have two types of evolution. We have that slow, uniform Darwin type evolution. We're a baby, we're an adult, we die. Or we have cataclysmic evolution. And sometimes we create cataclysmic revolution in order to evolve. And I'm thinking we're going to have a few of those with Pluto and Aquarius.
Oh, yeah.
Brian, you've been so patient. I just thought you raised your hand. I could see
You guys
it.
are awesome.
Yeah, I have
Thank
a
you.
question for Kim too later on.
What's really, 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 really important to understand, kids and campers, regarding the media is that in 1987, we had the obliteration of the fairness doctrine. And the fairness doctrine by the FCC required those who broadcasted news to give for all lack of better words, a holistic perspective, to show differing viewpoints. So prior to 1987, that was a rule. 87 came along, hey, here comes Rush Limbaugh, where I can tell you exactly what I think the news says.
That's who brainwashed my father.
And so that was what, Saturn, Uranus in Sagittarius in conjunction, and Pluto had that time moved into Scorpio. So that would say to me something a little more dark and subversive happening behind the scenes based on that decision, rather than something like more altruistic. So So the answer, how do we find fairness again in news? We reinstate the fairness doctrine. Oh, how else are we going to do it? No other way that I can personally see. So that's what I had to say.
Yeah, but getting that reinstated during the next
Yeah.
4, 8, 10 years, that's going to be a tall order.
Put it on the list of things to do.
Yeah.
So Michael wanted to ask a question before I jumped in, and I wanted to make sure that he got a chance to talk because he graciously gave me his chance.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, the
And-
question. I'll
And
kind of
after you, me.
What's that?
After Rob, was it that Robin who wanted to ask a question too?
Well, yeah, I do.
Yeah. And no, okay. So I'm after everybody. Okay. I have a question for him later on.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, with Pluto out of bounds for so long, I think that the qualities of Pluto, the destruction element, is going to be at the forefront, and things being really dragged down into the the muck at the bottom. And when it gets back into the ecliptic, that then the resurrection forces will then start to move forward. So that's just my piece on that. What you were just saying, Ryan, it's interesting that, because I forgot when it was after the Fairness Act. That's when they voted in the I forgot what they call it, the act that where corporations are people.
Citizens United 2011, I believe.
2010.
Yeah.
And
Okay, well, that I think helps cement some things in also, and that needs to go.
Yeah.
So the question I had with Kim, with what you were saying, Kim, what you were saying was right on, and very brilliant. And I also recognize, I mean, sometimes this is like so painfully obvious. Not only is there internal propaganda, there's propaganda coming out of Russia and China, very much so, into this company and into this this country. And the right-wing media, it just seems to be really soaking it up, and a lot of the conspiracy theorists really soak it up too, and feeds into the consensus realm very strongly. So I just wondered what you've come up with, Kim, about the propaganda that's out there by other forces other than just internally.
Oh, it's out there and it's insidious, and it's out there mainly in social media. And we don't have anything in our country that regulates social media. I mean, we're dinosaurs compared to Europe, and a few other countries. There's no regulation of social media, so they're getting away with it. And you heard very little about that this election cycle versus 2020, when we actually embarrassed Facebook enough that they actually, tried to do something. Twitter was better than Facebook, pre-Musk days. So, but this time, all the propaganda on social media, it was just like anything goes, Wild West.
Right. Well, one thing I'm really glad of that proved to be false. Just this morning, I heard that Elon Musk bought Facebook.
Oh, God.
I looked at that right away. And it's like, that's total BS. Yeah.
Right. That's like I heard that since Trump won, that Hamas pulled out of the war.
Yeah.
Total propaganda. And I've
There's a
noticed
really good. Oh, sorry, Robin.
I noticed that since the win that there's a lot more Russian news and journalism on YouTube than there was before.
Excuse me.
Oh, I was going to type this in, but there's like this really good documentary on Netflix. I don't know if you guys have watched it. That kind of speaks to some of this stuff, but it was pertaining to the 2020 election, and it's called The Antisocial Network, if you guys have ever seen it. I found it fascinating whenever I watched it a couple of years ago, and I'm pretty sure Yeah, no, you should just check it out. It's speaking to a lot of these points that each one of us are talking about.
The Antisocial Network.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
Antisocial Network. Yeah.
Okay.
And it goes into, yeah, other countries infiltrating social media to promote propaganda. And, again, I'm going to
Right.
bring it back to like, we're in a Jupiter retrograde in Gemini right now. And I find it fascinating that this is what we're talking about. I love astrology so much because it is something that's observable if you just observe, whenever I'm like talking to people, like friends or whoever, I'm just like, just watch it. If you know the archetype or something. And now I have friends calling me and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing this. And is that Jupiter retrograde? And I'm like, yeah. So, and here we are talking about it. I don't know. I'm like a little kid.
Okay, so
Yeah,
my next thought was, what do you think about also the fact that Neptune is nearing the end of its time in Pisces?
I think we're
And
going to get a
that
reality
influence
check.
on misinformation and
Yeah.
disassociation from reality.
I've talked about this a little bit, but I'm with the nodes that we have right now, South Node Libra, North Node Aries. This has been like and then whenever they came in, Pluto was square those nodes. This was, almost 18 months ago. And so for this 18-month nodal cycle, we're seeing these extremes, Libra, from the past of these structures happening. And unfortunately, humans, we like to sit in our shit, that's just kind of, it takes an extreme to counteract an extreme, Libra. And I don't think that we're going to see that extreme happen until the nodes switch to the South Node Virgo, North Node Pisces. And that's when crises is going to happen in such a way that people start to listen. And when Neptune shifts into Aries, that's whenever things will have more of a chance to change because we're being forced to on a collective level. Right now, it's kind of people are putting their blinders on and it hasn't gotten extreme enough,
Mhm.
And I think for people like us who are not in the consensus, it is, I've experienced vertigo since the election, and I'm being woo-woo, but I'm like, I have a Mars in the 12th house and a packed 8th house. I'm like, I think that it's me feeling this, of just like the craziness of everything. But I really feel like whenever the nodes shift, Pluto's going to be in Aquarius. It's buckle up, because that's when we're going to see. We had a choice. Pluto square the nodes. It amounts to free will, and we had a choice, and we didn't do certain things even prior to the election. I'm not even going to blame this on the election. I'm going to talk about as a collective whole, because we are masochistic. It's how society is structured everywhere, pretty much. And so we're not going to see that until things get bad enough. And that really sucks,
Mhm.
And Neptune will be conjunct the North Node as well.
Mm-hmm.
Next,
Yeah.
next spring during the Venus retrograde in Aries Pisces, that's when the nodes are going to cross over into Pisces Virgo. Venus retrograde is going to go 3 times over Saturn and 3 times over Neptune. There's just a plethora of stuff around the next Venus retrograde, and Mercury will be retrograde in Aries Pisces at the same time as Venus. Just the that'll be for the next podcast.
Year ahead.
Yeah. Year ahead.
Tim's planting seeds now.
Yeah, we need to give people some hope before the
Right.
let's
The
not hit them
lunar,
with everything at once.
the lunar north
I-
Just
node,
kidding.
the lunar north node goes into Pisces on Columbus Day, and so it's which is ironic date, but in a different kind of finding a new land. I think that gives something, moving into Pisces, the
Yeah.
north it's sort of like a different kind of hope will set the.
Sure. Passion.
I want
perhaps,
to ask
brotherly
Kim
love,
something.
maybe.
And I'm taking us back a minute to evolutionary states, if you will.
Mhm.
Because when I was taught this section of evolutionary astrology by Maurice Fernandez, then Maurice always said that you could be only in one level, that your consciousness is ever grasping and it's, you're on one level in totality in your life, and you could maybe advance one or two sub levels in your life. I must say that trying to expand on that subject, I see it a little differently, and I wanted to know what you think about it, Kim, and everybody here, and if I can share my screen a minute, I'll put this I'll put some slides on. Great. So
I definitely have some comments in that direction, Nia, but I'll let you go first.
okay, great. I'd love to hear them.
You should be able to share.
Yeah, I'm sharing now. Okay, so first thing I wanted to ask how you see it. Come on, give me a full screen. Yeah. Is if you think that it's reasonable to expand this subject of evolutionary levels, not to hold only Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune in, but the whole axis, in a sense. The 4-10 axis, the 5-11 axis, and 6-12 axis in correlation. And then maybe even to add the moon, the sun, and Mercury into the mix. And whether you think that we could have more consciousness through our subjective, past and experience in some areas of our life, and it will, of course, imprint this light on other areas in our life, but there would still be other areas in our life in which we could be less evolved. And that a person can be more evolved or less evolved. I don't know what the scale, how wide the scale can be in different areas of their lives differently. And there's another example I give here just after this, that if you take social, sociology and Abraham Maslow and his pyramid of Maslow's need, you could see some correlations of evolutionary states as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I would love to get all of your opinions.
Sure. Part of Jeffrey Green's original teachings, which I do agree with, is that we can have a part of our soul in one area of consciousness and another part of our soul in another area that maybe is a little more advanced. I do agree with Maurice, and Jeffrey Green said this as well. We can't have part of us necessarily in consensus and jump ahead to spirituated. We've still got to go through that process of learning, okay? But and we didn't have this on the screen, but in consensus, individuated, spirituated, we got first, second, third consensus, first, second,
Sub-levels.
third, individuated, sub-levels. So like, for instance, I see this a lot. I'll see somebody who is, third consensus in their career and doing great, but they're first individuated in their emotional, psychological life and relationships, and as insecure as they come, which is what comes with first individuated. So there can, yes, be that split. Over the years, I started to say that I think many of our souls, we will come in, and I called it the Reader's Digest version of expanding. Because I grew up in a very consensus world. I went to church until my early 20s when I had a crisis that just said, fluff that. And that blew me apart. And I just went boom, 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 boom. And so I think, again, and like you said, we hold that consensus within us. We don't leave it behind because we have to function in this world. You know, we have to pay our property taxes or whatever to just, you know, live together as collectives. So there's some, I agree with you, there's fluidity to it. And souls can be part of this and part of that. But again, it's not going to be wide leaps between consensus and spirituated. Just think about it, how we try to have a conversation with somebody in that consensus state and bring out some spiritual concept, and you know, their eyes get glazed over. They're like, what are you talking about? And Jeffrey Green would always say, if you talk above somebody, they get confused and rejected. If you talk below somebody, they're bored. So one of the things he would always say in his teachings is that you've got to adjust your language to where the other person's at you're communicating with. Make sense, Nia?
Well, yeah, great. Thank you for that.
I want to kind of add to that too, like, because I think that the other dynamic that I've seen and I've also experienced, and it sounds, Kim, you might have experienced this too, is I remember whenever I first got into EA, I thought I was a consensus person. And I remember a few astrologers laughing at me lovingly. Like, it wasn't like a ha ha to be mean. It was more like, no, you've been hiding in the consensus for whatever reason. But I think that there's this distinguishing factor, because my dad preached every Sunday Easter on Genesis, and I went to private Catholic school because my mom is French and Irish, and my dad is Native American and Scottish, and so he was Southern Baptist. But my underlying desire was not that. And that's like the big thing, is once you talk to someone and you really start understanding them. Like, I was a kid who wanted to be in nature and to talk to my dogs and to understand, like, what is God? Because I don't think that this is, like, there was this underlying desire that was, I mean, my dad was trying to convince me about Christianity and getting me books that were written by Hebrew authors, and me reading it and being like, this is stupid, you know, like, just but the underlying dynamic was always that there is something, it's not what I'm being taught. And there were other things that I was being taught. And that just shows that I had been a soul who was hiding, because I knew whenever I was being taught eugenics or things like that, at like 4, I would cry and I would say, this is not right. But then, like, adult age, understanding EA, I mean, if you were to go back on my Facebook and look at me, I'm like decked out in like makeup and jewelry and like totally looked consensus. And that is so not who I am, you know? And it's not that I jumped from the consensus to, I guess, maybe first stage spiritual, third stage individuated, something like that. It's that I was always like that. I was just suppressing that. And that's another thing, is to understand someone's underlying core desire, and that if you can get to the meat of that, it doesn't matter how they're appearing, it's that desire. So I don't know if that helps too.
I think sometimes we suppress it because of trauma.
I mean, hence we were talking about all of my Capricorn, by the way, there it is. So
but you know,
Jordyn,
it takes a heck of a lot of courage to actually step out and be yourself. And because we are herd animals, we didn't survive if we didn't stay with the tribe, and that's just in the DNA. So it's a heck of a risk to actually step out and be your authentic self. And I would suspect that there's a lot of people who are like that. I mean, I see them all the time in my coaching business, you know, but you can only be a guide and a light for someone who is in that position without shaming them, without telling them that they need to step over here or whatever. People have to go at their own pace. If you think about how the universe, how the divine, how the angels and the archangels actually work with us, they do not, there's no retribution. There's only cause and effect. There's only law. There's no judgment. When you learn to do something better or different, then you do it. They don't play the blame game at all. It's just, there's no emotion around how they work with us. And so for those of us who are in positions of, say, being spiritual in a different way, or, part of that 20%, we have to step out of the judgment of others. We have to hold. Our job is to hold the light. That is it. And let the divine, let the universe do its work, because that is what is happening. I mean, we talk about this and also esoteric astrology, where in our human consciousness, we're like on a fourth level, which is harmony through conflict. The way we evolve is through conflict, because we haven't learned yet to evolve through love.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so
How it always has been.
therefore, my 2 cents is that it is our role as astrologers to be as closely attuned to that more spiritual level, and like Marie said, hold that light, that no matter if someone's deep in consensus, and let's face it, chances are they're not coming to us for a reading, but they're right on that edge of individuating, or are already in there, or whatever higher level. And so our job is to encourage that best of all possible expressions of their chart in that highest, most divine level, while being as aware as humanly possible of what happens when we fall asleep at the wheel or when we go unconscious.
Yeah.
And so on that note, I know that no matter how, quote, spiritual I can be as whatever Neptunian, blah, 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 Sag, Pisces, blah, 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 no matter how spiritual and reflective I can be, I know that there are days when I devolve into the lowest common denominator, and I'm wallowing in my South Node, Pluto, self-pity, whatever. That happens even if I consider myself to be whatever more spiritual. I think that those levels can definitely fluctuate, like someone else said, with trauma, with an election result, with etc. So 2 cents.
Jordyn, I just want to say, I mean, you may or may not have been, suppressing or hiding, but also, as Marie brought out, the universe has its own timing and everything, and so do you, so do each one of us. We're not, timing is everything. We incarnating isn't just going into the body. It's like everything of us, these higher parts of us, all the way down, is incarnating, and we incarnate slowly. And as a young person, we don't have all the tools, necessarily at hand. I mean, it's a very rare person who does. I mean, it's a very, already evolved person if they're, that incarnated at a young age. But, it's like, just in what you said there, I mean, I just want to encourage you and encourage all of us to, like, cut yourselves some slack.
Exactly. I mean, you see our teachers. Well, when I think about the spiritual teachers, when I know when they listen to me over the years, there have been some things that, they're more evolved and advanced. And yet, if I've spoken an untruth, or if I've been in a particular state of mind that isn't correct, they don't tell me I'm not correct. They hold compassion. And what they do is reflect back to me what truth actually is and allow me to discover the truth on my own. Because, I mean, anyway, that's holding the
Well, a
light.
great teacher has that humility anyway, and knows that they have something possibly to learn from you. That it's a
Yes.
two-way thing. Even a great teacher can learn something.
Exactly.
Yeah, humility.
Exactly. And the problem is we judge. We just,
Yeah, I
and
think we know.
yeah,
I
we
think
think we
it's
know.
this is like
I think we know.
I say this often. There's more than one way to get to Denny's, right? Like at the end of the day, there's more than one way to get to Denny's.
Well, let's get there. Let's get there in a few minutes, shall we?
Jordyn, Denny's filed for bankruptcy. The chain filed for bankruptcy. So you got to pick a new restaurant.
Oh,
chain.
gosh.
Really?
Yeah,
You
you
know,
might not
TJ
get, you
oh
might
my
not be
God.
able to get there
Oh,
from here.
no.
I
Really?
also think I'm probably like the last generation who knows what a Denny's is. So, you know, I'm 35. So it's like a
God.
little, I don't know.
You know, TGI Fridays
It's
also
very
filed for
American. Like
bankruptcy.
I know it basically from American films, but I've never eaten there myself, or I don't know
I'm not
what
missing
kind of
anything.
fast
Man,
food,
you know
Definitely
what?
not.
When I
sell
was
there.
little, I loved me a Denny's Grand Slam, all right?
Or
It was
after
the
night
only-
clubbing all night. I couldn't believe that. In England, in those days, 80s, everything's shut, at like 11, 10, well, no, 9 at night probably.
Right.
But Denny's, in places like that open all night. You could have breakfast
Oh yeah,
at 3 and 4 and 5. And I couldn't believe it.
it's
Do
the
your
place to go
homework
after you
with the
partied all
bottomless cup
night.
of coffee.
Yeah.
Great hangover food.
Oh yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Is
Well,
anyone
New York, I remember
Waffle
the White
House.
Castle that was open 24 hours.
right?
After
anyone
one
great
of
aware
my
of the-
rubber band.
fascinations was with a beef slaughtering clown. So feel comfortable.
Right? Is anyone aware of the movie? It was out I don't know, it's quite a while ago. Smoke Signals.
Mm-mm.
No.
It's based on a book by I forgot his name, Native American author, and and it takes place in the Coeur d'Alene Reservation here in Idaho, and there's a great story in there about a Denny's. But Smoke Signals is a great movie. You have to
I'm gonna write that down.
It's on Netflix.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, me too.
I love Denny's, or used to. The food isn't
I'd
that
write
great,
that
but
down as well before they go bankrupt. I'll hold on.
Yeah.
Can
yeah.
someone pull the
Denny's.
chart of Denny's?
I know,
Yeah.
right? I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
I started
That's
something.
right.
Sorry.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Like,
think
are
I
we
have
all
electric
hungry
food.
here?
Look,
Go
just
by
any
wheel
comment
with
about
Jordyn and Denny's.
I love it. Kim Marie's like, they file for
High
bankruptcy.
spirituality.
Well, it's probably something like Denny's is Venus in your fourth house or something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comfort food.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
digress.
And I just heard that TGI Fridays also filed for bankruptcy. That was the other place we used to go to all the time
heard
on
that.
Friday.
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
not all,
Those
just on Friday,
darn
but
local independent restaurants
Um,
closing down those chains. What is going on?
Well, they
Has the
blame
world gone crazy? I tell you.
Well,
That's
we're going to
true.
end up with one restaurant chain, one bank.
Ah,
Oh God.
Yeah,
not as long as
restaurant.
there's credit unions.
it's all going to belong to Elon Musk.
Yeah, right.
So why don't we bring up his chart?
Okay, let's do it.
Yes.
Look,
Yeah.
I truly believe that in the future, extreme wealth is going to be regarded as illegal and unmoral as slavery is regarded today.
But slavery is
The
not
distribution-
regarded as. But slavery isn't regarded as illegal because people who are working jobs that they hate, or having to work 60, 70 hours a
Well,
week. That's slavery.
capitalism, liberal capitalism has its ways of enforcing us to be modern slaves. I agree with that.
Mhm.
But de jure, it's still illegal. De facto, yes, we're all slaves. You're right.
Yeah.
But de jure, at least in some places over this world, it's illegal. And if we're talking about the consensus level, the consensus has agreed that this is immoral in general. you know?
Mhm.
We're all false and hypocrites, but yeah, you know. But I think that the distribution of wealth as it is today is going to be looked at as preposterous, you know, and ill as, you know, we see the slave owning lords of the South today,
No,
you
it's
know,
right.
in a
It's
sense.
raising its head, one of its hydra heads now. In the United States, I just heard that their African American descent people, I don't know what state this was, but they're receiving mail, probably from some white supremacist group, telling them they have to turn up at such and such a center. Don't bring clothes or anything. Just come as you are. You are all being taken to different plantations for you.
What?
Yeah, I mean, these are
These
crazy
were
people.
texts sent out to mostly historically Black colleges, HBCs, and to the students there, and most of them being Black women is what it was. Yeah.
You know that these are Jean provocateurs, these provocators are also, you know, they could be Russian funded,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they could very well be.
you know. Now in Israel, they found out like this whole network of Iranian spies that, you know, that were called to do incinerations or graffitis or, you know, open up Facebook groups, hate
Mhm.
groups, or WhatsApp groups and things like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, here we are, Jupiter and Gemini.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At the
and Neptune.
Oh, I didn't say, I guess.
coming to eventually a square to Neptune at the highest distortion level we
Oh,
could
yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, it looks like Jupiter is on Elon's Venus, isn't it?
Yes.
Fun, fun, fun.
What?
That makes sense.
You see Jupiter on his Venus?
Isn't it
Oh.
Venus?
It is. It is.
Yeah, but Jupiter
Yeah.
is next to Neptune.
Yeah.
There's his love
Transiting
affair.
Jupiter, Robin.
No, transiting.
Transiting Jupiter.
Okay, yeah, all right.
No, but there's his love affair with Donald Trump and his Gemini stellium.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he really does love Donald Trump.
Mhm.
And
And-
Donald loves him back.
But
Yeah.
isn't it something? He has a Cancerian sun in the first house.
Well, Trump has a Mercury that falls right in here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, the megaphone. That's what I call him. Trump's megaphone.
Mm.
Right.
I don't see why we're criticizing this. It's a consensual love affair between two
Yeah.
consenting megalomaniacs, you know, and
It
I don't know
really
why we're
is.
being so judgmental.
Well,
Because they may destroy the world.
We have to live with their
Oh,
choices.
oh, that.
Oh,
with this
that.
Venus,
Now you're
with this
being picky.
Venus, this Venus in the 12th house would show that this is with Trump's sun right near there. It's definitely a past life relationship.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So I asked questions about this. I've shared this before, and then I did some researching to think about this, but I think it's fascinating that if you look at Trump and then you look at who Odoacer was, there's a lot of parallels with prior life, present life dynamics.
Give us a little background, Jordyn.
Ooh.
So
I know you've
Odoacer,
mentioned him before.
yeah. I had a lot of questions on the message board years ago, and really dug into this. And as a matter of fact, when you pulled this up, I was thinking about what you guys were talking about. And I was like, this has to be from that prior lifetime. So Odoacer is known as the fall of the Roman Empire. I'm going to botch this, just kind of do your own history lesson. But he came in to the Roman Empire and he persuaded the democracy to be on his side through propaganda. And so the gist of it is that through that, he was the person who created the fall of the Roman Empire. And so if you look at what is going on right now within the democracy here, it runs
Parallel.
it's painting the same story as that lifetime as Odoacer. So
And
Trump
isn't the theory
has Odoacer.
Yeah, the theory is that Trump is the reincarnation of Odoacer.
Yeah.
Mm.
hmm
Oh, interesting.
Well, I guess
So-
that does beg the question, though. I mean, are there aspects of our current incarnation of the Roman Empire that is needing transformation? And so and I'm just devilly advocating here, or advocating devilishly, what if that's a good thing? What if there are aspects of Western civilization and its environmental degradation and there are things that
Brian, I
we all need to
absolutely
change.
agree with you because I
And so what would happen if rather than, and I'm just making things up as I go here, but what if on some strange level he is actually a protagonist for much of what could have been considered a liberal or left-wing agenda to be, although he doesn't know that that is going to be the end result, because if every action has an equal and opposite reaction, then his ascension to presidency should elicit an equal and opposite reaction in those who are wanting change or other different powers, thusly eliciting the change that we're all going here.
this is
Yeah,
what
I
I
have no
meant by
doubt that
that.
he-
It takes an extreme to counteract an extreme.
Sure.
And then usually what helps with the counteraction before you meet middle ground is a Virgo-like crisis, right? And yeah, whenever structures are no longer
Working.
survivable for the long run, there are things that I feel like come into play that we don't understand why they're happening at the time, but there is a bigger picture. I do want to say that as humans, though, we still have free will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about those countries like Russia, North Korea that get taken over and they can't get out from under?
Well, they will get out.
Well, here comes an
It's
out of
just-
bounds Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wasn't
exactly.
not-
Neptune,
And I
Saturn
think we
conjunction.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that said it's not about whether you should be an extremist, but what kind of extremist you choose to be.
Right, exactly. And and I also say we have to look at that Pluto-Uranus conjunction that happened back in 65. This is part of that cycle. And we're headed towards I think it's the sesqui square with that in the early 2030s. And this is
Fun.
Mhm. This
Nothing
is
like a good test square.
I know. And I have no doubt that Donald Trump and these guys, it's like they agreed to do this before they incarnated.
Sure.
They
Yes.
definitely did. And
Yeah.
and I do believe in some ways it's
We agreed
horrible.
to it
It's
too.
for our evolutionary. It's like it's a part of the
True. We
evolutionary.
took it upon ourselves. This option of this multiverse, we took upon ourselves. And in that sense, if we take this to our personal levels, I can understand and grasp at the same time that my father, excuse me, was an a-hole. Okay. He was a terrible father. He wasn't interested in being a family member. And this deeply traumatized me in my life. But this also taught my soul one of the most valuable lessons it needed to learn this time around, which is be a good parent. Never desert your kids. And I often tell my child that I wouldn't have been such a good parent if he wouldn't have been such a terrible one.
Yeah.
And I understand that his soul and mine meet over many generations, and as friends, can take upon themselves difficult tasks to help us learn, in a sense, doesn't equate him of his deeds this time around, doesn't justify them or make them right. But in the great sense of things, there's as much good here as trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of
No,
the
and
facets
we're
of
speaking
your
to-
relationship that you experience over many lifetimes.
Yeah, true. And in that sense, humanity at large, or, the American people, and their relationship with this father figure called Donald Trump right now and the American presidency, also, in a way, we're all learning a lesson.
Mm-hmm. We're learning about
What we're,
ourselves.
I think
Yeah.
what we're speaking to though, because how this got brought up, like with Elon Musk, Sue, will you go back to his natal chart? Him and Donald Trump have very pronounced Lucifers in their chart. And you're talking about prior life dynamics that they're coming in with, but also what I'm hearing from all of you guys is that they might be playing some of the darker dimensions of Lucifer in their chart, but what it's really doing is it eventually is going to bear a light on what
Yeah.
absolutely needs to be changed.
Yep, exactly.
And so I just wanted to point that out
That's
because
a
this
wonderful
Lucifer
perception.
is very prominent in his chart.
That's a
My
wonderful
assessment as
perception.
well.
Yep,
So they're
absolutely.
they're conduits to
Uh-huh.
heighten consciousness. In a
Yep,
sense,
they sure are.
And
Yeah, I think that's
Trump's progressed Lucifer is right around that same place, conjunct his Pluto.
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Conjunct his natal Pluto.
Mm-hmm. Well, his natal and progressed, they're about the same place.
10 degrees. Yeah.
I gotta go get water. Hold on.
Wow.
Yeah,
there's
and you
clear-
know
That's
that
really
the third house is the house of the heretic.
Mm.
So,
It's really?
yeah.
I never heard that.
It
well,
is
if the
because it's
ninth is the
Gemini.
house of
House of
Christ,
Heretics.
so
Well, this is the second house.
all these modern heretics, look at it in a medieval sense, because the ninth was connected to spirituality and religion, clergy. So the third would be all these city folks,
Yeah.
that believe in science instead of God.
Heretic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting? Elon Musk has an Aquarius North Node.
Yes.
Yep.
And he also has progressed retrograde Mars that is now moved to a conjunction of the North Node.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Neptune is
Carrying
wild.
out his mission.
Mm-hmm. He really is. We just don't
all
like
these-
the mission.
No.
All these people that are bringing in these,
Interesting.
I think they are definitely conduits, as was mentioned.
Yeah.
Not that they are consciously doing this. They have their agendas, and they end up having that effect on many people. Bringing the light to them. Not that they are bringing the light, but it's in response. And in the big picture, our age. This comes out of my studies through Steiner directly, but in the time that we live now, especially in the past few hundred years and into the future, one of the main things that we have to do is face evil, and to see it for what it is, and we have to transform it from within. And this is the tricky part.
Yes, it's
But
hard.
it has to happen. We can't be like, can't just deny evil or pretend to exist, or say, oh, I'm only going to focus on the spiritual, because evil itself is spiritual.
Well, evil is really just our shadow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's facing a shadow. And like
Yeah.
Carl Jung talked about the transition again, the transition of the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. And he pointed out that the ion of Aquarius is Saturn ruled, of course. Of course, it's Uranus ruled as well. But saying it's Saturn ruled, he said, I've got a note here, would initially be a true nigredo, the alchemical phase of nigredo, which is the blackening, which is the putrefaction, it's the shadow. It's basically, it's boiling down to the shadow. Within the collective psyche, as human beings face the profound and necessary confrontation with the problem of their own evil.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Mhm.
Basically, he said we were in the we've been in the phase of Nigredo for
So
heavily
can I
since
see where I
World War
signed
I.
up for all this again?
Sorry?
South
Can
Node,
you show me my
Pluto.
signature again, where I signed up for all this? I need that verification.
Yeah,
please.
where did we
Sure,
sign
we're
up?
not just thrown.
I
Where is my
actually
ballot?
think when we had COVID, it was like
Perfect storm.
yeah, and it was a timeout that we were given to help us on this journey, and to work on the shadow. And what did we do? We tuned out. We watched more TV. We screamed about having to be at home, and people just did not want to go inward. And this
But
is
it-
But they
also a
weren't aware,
consequence.
were they?
It,
People weren't aware generally. We were aware that Saturn was conjunct Pluto, and that this was the shadow. This was a dark period
Yeah.
that we had to go with, really try to understand. But
Yeah.
it made it easier, as you said before, Kim. You said the trouble is you forget that others don't realize that. They think of it totally differently, whereas we were expecting a war or we knew there was something heavy coming for years, with the combination of with the eclipse as well in Saturn, lunar eclipse Cancer at the same time, and so we knew that it was going to be, and obviously it had the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, which was important at the end of the year 2020 on the winter solstice, 0 degrees Aquarius. So we knew that this was a real turning point, but it was going to not be a party because Pluto Saturn, but that's it. We had that knowledge, and if you don't have that knowledge, then, or even the instincts,
That's the greatness of astrology. And excuse me, we still are in dark times, and this pause that we had was really the heavy quiet before the storm.
Oh yeah.
It was that stillness, lying and waiting for
going
interpretation in a sense, as astrologers, and to this continual dance that we're going into right now, and we know the motions from the past, we know what's going to happen, and here we are,
So then we have.
I don't want to like overgeneralize, but something that I did see during COVID, and maybe this is because this is my peers, and I'm not saying across the board all of them by any means. Again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but so I was born in 89, and I feel like a lot of people who were born 87 to 93, what I saw was, and it's a good grouping of us, is that we did take that time during COVID. It did something to us, but we're also the generation who has like Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and I think a lot of us figured out what purposeful work to do, or a lot of us disconnected from family members that we didn't need to be connected with anymore, where we felt we were oppressed. A lot of us did environmentalism work, because this is like Pluto and Scorpio generation, but it was a very small percentage of us. And I think that that's why a lot of us started freaking the F out and being like, why is no one else doing this? This was like the grouping of people who were sharing how lakes were clearing up, how the oceans were clearing up, or trying to share these messages. Or I can speak for myself. I had just gotten out of my Saturn return, and I found EA, and I can remember sitting in my office chain smoking, listening to Jeffrey Wolf Green, like just trying to osmose it all in at the time, So there was like a group of us, and in my experience, and like I said, this is a very small group, but it gives me a lot of I think that's the generation of, well, a lot of us had that new phase Saturn Uranus, and so a lot of us were trying to figure out how to seed things into the collective consciousness at that time. It did give us a break to do Capricorn and to reflect about how do we want to move forward with this. Again, a lot of us born in that time period are consensus though, so it's it's very small, but in my humble opinion, I feel like a lot of us, especially who might have been hiding or checking boxes up until that point decided enough is enough, and we really did use that time. And
Oh
that
God,
makes
this
me
is so
like
good.
hopeful for the future a little
Yeah.
bit, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, and to your
True.
point, Jordyn, the inadvertent thing that happened was that the environment did get better and showed us, you know, that
Yeah.
if
difference.
indeed we would have to, you know, back off from all of this, it can get better, but no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do we have the progress chart for the US?
I think you do, don't you? I thought I saw it. You put it up
Because
there.
I mean, you know, so we can look at really where we are going.
I think
sure
I
you
have
know
it in
where we're
a
going,
I think I have it in the Astro Speak. I can look for it if you guys want to.
Okay, yeah, you know, if you bring up even the natal chart of the US, so we can look at the, you know, the nodes again, and I always use the Sagittarius ascendant because it just seems like that's
it does
who we
work,
are.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and especially on 9/11, I mean, the way that was configured, you know, with the Saturn-Pluto opposition right across the ascendant at 14 degrees, isn't it?
Oh,
12,
yes.
14 degrees,
I think
Sag?
it's 14.
Well,
yeah.
I
So it's
have
right there. I mean, it couldn't have been more appropriate. So that since that, I've been convinced the Sibley really is the one that works.
Yeah, and I think about how we're perceived out in the world, and also when you look at Sagittarius and what it is, it's about an aspiration.
Yeah.
And it's something that we're always working towards. It doesn't mean that we achieve it, but we're working towards it.
The arrow shooting upwards,
Yeah.
Jupiter, yeah.
So
Yeah,
this is from our Astro Speak for election day. It's got a whole lot of stuff on it. But
all wrong.
But the natal chart, the progression is in the center, and transits for election day are on the outside.
Yeah, very good, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Yeah, I wrote some notes on that, but
yeah, and I mean, you know, we are in our.
So we've got until Pluto hits the south node of the US to take a really hard, concerted look at all the things that we need to change, what our dark places are, and work to change them. Hashtag thank you, out of bounds Pluto. So that when transiting Pluto comes to conjoin the south node of the US, we then implement all of those things that we had been conjecturing or arguing about for the previous however many years it takes Pluto to go 6 degrees. And then and that way we can avert the potential shadows of Pluto conjoining the south node, because otherwise, if we don't take the next several years, half decade, whatever it is.
Well, it's not that long.
Well, it's 27, 28, and it'll be 2 retrograde cycles, 5 hits.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a little bit,
and
but
Saturn,
still
Saturn will be in Taurus near the end of 28, I think, squaring Pluto.
I'd love to celebrate.
And Chiron will be squaring as well, Pluto. So,
I'd love to celebrate the fact that Uranus, the dispositor of Aquarius, will be in a trine with Pluto. And so there is a magnificent opportunity for Uranus, maybe more aligned with the people or the common individual, or you know, so there is incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting. Exactly. It's like you've got Saturn bad cop and Uranus good cop.
Yeah, I mean, fancy that. And so Uranus is there saying, hey, if you can make the change, can you grow? Can you evolve? Can you change up? Can you do something differently? Can you pivot? And so pivoting, I think, is our best response to everything from the election to anything that's going to happen next. My candidate didn't get chosen. Okay, turn and blend with it. I'm still here.
And as you say, that's what's so interesting. That's the period of, you know, of Trump's his tenure is all going well or badly, whatever you want to look at it. But that, you know, 2028, it's that period. So it's like it sort of gets to that then, which is amazing.
Yeah,
So
it
it's
does.
so it's working up to it from now. It's like we're going towards a crescendo.
And,
it's
and
not-
our Uranus return.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, of the US Uranus return. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Because I think it's
But what's
29.
yeah,
isn't it?
but
That just
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What kind of
Yeah,
rebellion
but
will
the
that
question
be?
I mean,
becomes, can we evolve? Because this is not just, you've got to have a certain percentage of the population that evolves to actually pull the rest of the population along.
Right.
No, I think events can do that. I think we've seen, as you were saying about COVID too,
Yeah.
how that did. Yes, people did take it a certain way. The consensus was watching Netflix, etc. But and moaning about, you know, not being able to do anything. But it still had an impact. It still
Yeah.
made an evolution. They still started to notice the environment, as you said.
Right.
They still, it did change. So it
Yeah.
changed the perspective, even though it's not as much. It's
Yeah,
still
but in
changed.
another way, it kind of led to what happened now.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the repercussions were the decline in the economy, and
Yeah.
that's what made people feel
Yeah.
desperate and want change.
I
Right.
think
Right.
that the people who
Right.
have like that Saturn Uranus new phase conjunction, I feel like COVID was a time to where they were having seeds planted for themselves. And you've got to think that's that grouping of people, it's in Capricorn. So they're late bloomers in this area. And it's going to come whenever I firmly like really feel this, if this makes sense. It's not even about me believing it. I'm not saying it's going to be like so many people, but I feel like it's going to be a handful of people from like those 87 to 1993 that they had these seeds planted during that time, and they are growing on an internal soul level, and they will come out and they will say things, or they will do things that help the collective move forward in the way that it needs to.
During
think
their
that's
Pluto
true.
square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
1,000%. And I feel like they can be the actual natural role models that help seed the collective within the consensus and help for it to grow and to accelerate, because Pluto in Aquarius does have that acceleration, and that's their Uranus that's going to be activated by that Pluto in Aquarius. And
But
so
you know, we
it's
just had a new
it's something I
moon
feel.
in this country just had a new moon too.
Yes, we did in
Scorpio.
Pisces.
Yeah, in Pisces. So we're in a new phase. And it's Pisces
Yeah, so have faith.
Scorpio.
or delusion.
Right.
You have delusion.
Or sometimes delusion can be good. It
Is it
takes a little bit
interesting,
of
though?
delusional optimism to make things move forward. I have a North Node in Pisces though, so
But a healthy,
too.
a healthy
Oh.
disillusionment.
yeah.
Well, it's in the
But as
third house. I mean, and
Yeah.
Disillusionment. Awesome.
well,
But as you were
we
saying,
have to go through that.
We are leaving the
each
Neptune
generation,
age.
yeah, each generation with Pluto, you know, like it started the oldest generation with both presidents, Pluto and Leo. So each generation is having a different impact on the circumstances, on the events, which is so interesting. And yes, Pluto and Leo is part of the old patriarchy, and what we have to see is the shadow of, well, hubris, too much pride, I guess, that side of Leo. And obviously it's the opposite of Aquarius. So it's where we've come. It's from empire and all of that, imperialism. So
Don't you think that it's kind of strange that the Democrats conceded so quickly? And that a lot of people who voted, their votes aren't showing?
No, it was
There's-
obvious that the
landslide.
Democrats had lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also feel like here's my opinion. I think that and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of freaking comments, or at least one comment after saying this if someone watches this, and I don't care. So thank you, whoever comments. Anywho, I truly feel like the way that Biden has handled trying to pass the torch to a woman who is multicultural, him having humility, him and Kamala conceding, it is all a way to show what natural leadership is within the ways in which society is structured right now. And I feel like because this is what always happens, is everyone shits on a president, right? When they're in office and right after they leave, and the next president who inherits it, they like to talk all of this stuff. But in hindsight, they always look back and the collective really sees the beauty of what someone was doing.
Yeah.
And I truly feel like he will go down as one of the best presidents because of his grace and his humility and his ability to try to pass a torch. He was trying to do what was right.
I strongly disagree on that. I mean, he passed it too late, which Sue did point out at the time when we were talking about before the election, predicting it. We were saying, because I was saying it looked bad for Kamala, but anyway, we were saying he's passed it too late. And that she is too much, and Sue said, you know, he is too much.
We also don't know what was going on between the two of them, or whether or not she was telling him, hey, you should keep going. You know, we don't know. I think it's more of the intention.
Yeah.
It was a massive oversight on his part. He should not run again.
I think he's too proud. I think, you know, that Pluto in Leo, I think he hung on too long, and no one would say, you know, it's time to go. It's like the emperor's new clothes. You got no clothes on.
The other one is also Pluto in Leo, who was hanging on and hanging on and hanging on, and look where it got him. Reelected.
Yeah.
Oh, but, you know, yeah, but I mean, hanging on, yeah, but it was, the trouble was Biden was definitely losing his faculties. I mean, there were so many, it was so obvious.
No, that's not true. That's just the way the media tried to portray him.
He has not lost his faculties to the degree that Trump has.
Not completely.
But again, this comes back to the very first point I made at the beginning. It's the perception of the collective.
Yes.
And they were fed Biden bad, Trump good.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, there was a lot of conferences where he you know, he did.
He wasn't a great debater. That doesn't mean he was losing his faculties.
Yes, he had a
and they marketed on that. They ran with it.
They did decide that he was too old in the end.
Yeah.
They did, but it was too
Trump
late.
Is not much younger.
He's not.
He's not.
And I think Trump is much more demented.
4 years makes a big difference, because Biden was okay for nearly 4 years. He was okay. He was good.
What they said about,
he's got 4 years, so it's like he's in the same position Biden was when he, you know, got the presidency.
Well, the bottom line is this election was going to turn out the way it turned out, no matter who was running. That's the bottom line.
Oh yeah, there is a certain fate to. I mean, that's why we can look at it. It's like there is a fate. I mean, and also, I mean, there's so many factors. I mean, Mars going to Leo, as we discussed before the election, was like, I mean, that conjuncted Trump's progressed Saturn in Leo, and his midheaven in Leo.
Yet. It will soon.
And now we just hang on for the ride.
Well, no, it's really, but it was going into Leo. It was applying to it. So
Kim, what were you gonna say?
And Aquarius and Aquarius.
If you do kind of an objective look, Biden had an aging brain and they hit it. Donald Trump has a dementing brain and they don't even care. Exploited all over the place, but again,
no, I'm not exploited. I'm not comparing.
Let me finish.
Trump.
Donald Trump has a dementing brain, but that did not come out in right-wing media like those of us who may watch CNN or MSNBC or whoever. They didn't hear it.
I don't even think they cared if they did hear it.
Exactly. They didn't.
Because remember, the president is usually not the one who's running the country.
Right.
The
Right.
policy
Only a
was to tear
figurehead.
it all down, and they want to
Well, I
change.
mean, that might be, but the thing is, the Democratic Party did make a decision that he had to, he wasn't going to win the election because he had deteriorated,
Right.
that he wasn't fit to get. So they did make that decision themselves, but they did all make it too late.
They
and
really
so it's like,
did.
I thought Camilla was handed a poison chalice.
Yeah,
It's a shame.
she really
because
was.
She made a good president, but yeah, I think
She was. And, what I hear also, even in my own community, when Kamala was chosen, a lot of people were very upset because they didn't have an opportunity
To choose,
to choose who they wanted to run.
There you go,
And they
Marie.
didn't feel like
It's
they
like
knew
Biden
her.
did.
They did not feel like
Biden
they
did
knew
that.
her.
Yeah.
They didn't
There's
feel like
one
they knew her.
reason, and from my observation and research and engaging with others, the number one reason why Kamala lost is because she was not voted in as the Democratic nominee.
Yeah,
She
she was not.
was appointed.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening with that is many Democratic voters felt disenfranchised, like they did not get to choose who
That's right.
they wanted to run for their and so right there, the Democrats lost the faith of the people.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like
they
she
didn't
was crammed
understand the
down
stakes.
people's throat without, and so they really needed to do this 6 months earlier or whatever.
Correct.
They should have.
Correct.
It's a shame, but then, as you say, there is a type of fate to it anyway. It's as though we have to go deeper into the dark. We're not going to. We want this great sort of release from it. We want to charge into the age of Aquarius. We want to be done with all of this alchemical phase and get out there into the libido, which is the phase where, and albedo, which you've got through it. But we have to go through the process. We just can't do that. And so it's combating that natural urge to say, we have control. It's like someone said about acceptance. We have to accept that there is a process, there is a spiritual, there's these wheels grinding, and they're much bigger than we can imagine, and that they have a certain fate to them. And the fate is that we have to confront, as Jung said, we have to confront the shadow. We have to go through the dark soul. There is no easy route. There's no, cutting through the lines at the fair, Disney or something, a fast pass.
And if I may, my perception, and this is, well, actually, this isn't my perception. This is one possible perception, not necessarily mine, but one possible perception is that, just maybe had, Kamala won, perhaps the base that voted her in would have expected her to do the things that is actually up to the people to do. And so I'm wondering, and this is just a question query, had she won, would the consensus become complacent? And now that she hasn't, that consensus will not be complacent. And maybe that's what the universe wants. Maybe that's what humanity needs for our evolution. So maybe, just maybe, we're on the best of all possible timelines. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at the mirror going, what the heck are you saying, dude? But, from that more omniscient point of view, these things are possible.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing is she doesn't become a scapegoat because, we've
she's going to shine bright.
She wasn't made a fall guy.
I think she's going to. Like I think in some weird way she's going to work with Trump at some
Yeah.
stage when the storm
Well,
hits
possibly.
fully, in a
I
sense.
mean,
But if I want to add to everything else, I want to say that
Their
I
charts
think
are
the
similar,
American
by the way.
psyche at large,
Yeah.
the American
Yeah.
psyche at
Looks like
large
Nia's
under-
turn. Nia's turn.
understands that we might be heading into a global conflict,
Oh,
Call it what
yeah,
you
we're heading
may,
in.
a third world war, East meets West,
Mm,
we ain't stupid, and
yeah.
and we understand what's behind the scenes already, in a sense. And in that sense, I think the American psyche is not ripe enough to let a woman as Kamala lead them into that final, scene.
Mm-hmm.
Armageddon.
And
No.
but they would rather have
yeah.
a schnauzer like Trump,
Yeah.
Well,
you know.
well, the thing is, yeah, it's yeah.
Again,
I
turning
mean,
to paternal father figures, fascist father figures. Worldwide, we see this, people who were leftists, or liberals and very open-minded back in the 60s and 70s and maybe even 90s, becoming more extremist right-handed, fascist-oriented,
well, that Mars going into Leo, it was so strong, and yeah, applying to the conjunction of Trump's progressed midheaven, his progressed side,
the
and
disillusion.
squaring, and T-squaring his progressed descendant, and it's a lot there. But that Mars in Leo is very much, it's young men were very much to do with the vote, it seems, and young men across the board. And so
We're
young
all
men,
soldiers, you see.
yes,
And this is
and
all a holy war we're in.
we have two
God is
things that
forbid.
really,
God is forbid.
war and the economy are really looming large now. And so young men are seeing their dreams go down the drain, their ability to make a future, and the possibility that they'll be sent, to war and have to fight in yet another senseless war that shouldn't have happened, to fill pockets of patriarchy, elite, rich guys who are in charge and have sent them to their deaths. They just don't, they are rebelling against that. And that very it's Pluto in Aquarius, but it's Mars in Leo saying, no, we are rebelling against it. It's more rebellion than anything else, not so much going for Trump, but Trump's the way to rebel. I mean, you either had Biden unfortunately, Camilla wore the crown, the tainted crown of Biden's, or you had Trump. And who do you go for? You're not going to go for Biden's camp. And Camilla, unfortunately, had that to bear, because you're not going to have 4 years of the same. You're not going to have a government that doesn't listen to you and that has let these wars happen. And, even I'm looking from an American standpoint as a European, we wanted NATO to defend against Russia, but even Europe overreacted about it. It should have been done diplomatically. Even Churchill said, he had his famous saying, jaw, not war. Diplomacy first. Don't charge in. And yes, they watched for ages before Putin actually went in. And they let it boil up and up and up. And it wasn't going to happen. Why didn't they start diplomacy? Because NATO wanted it. NATO wanted to go to war. And it's cost billions. It's cost hundreds of thousands of lives, mostly Ukrainian.
I don't believe that. I don't believe they wanted
what
to go to war.
Sorry, who?
I
Yeah,
said,
they
I don't
did.
believe that they wanted it. Kimmery, do you have anything else that you want to say before you have to go?
Well, they wanted to, because they want the upper hand against Russia, and they feel they were trying to do that anyway. They were in Ukraine. They were stepping further and further to the east with their missiles, with their weaponry. And they stepped on Russia's toes. I mean, Russia did want to take its territory back before then. It had been doing for years, 2006, 2014. But NATO was creeping further and further. And NATO, Europe should never have just relied on NATO. And America shouldn't have just been paying it. So Trump is right about that. Paying for NATO and Europe not fulfilling its own defense. And yet defense, though, that was going to be diplomatic before jumping the gun. And we jumped the gun. And there's been panic. And now they're going to have to pull out because it is failing. And Trump's going to probably pull the plug on the whole bloody thing. So, and that will have been a total waste. Young men do not want that. They don't want to go to the Middle East either. They don't want more America paying for, or anyone else paying for lives to be cost, their lives or the lives of innocent people. It's all part of the past. It's the imperialist past that needs to go. It needs to end. And the age of Aquarius and Pluto Aquarius is bringing it, it's going to accentuate it, like you said, Ryan, before. It's got to accentuate so people really, but they've already made it.
Allow Russia to trample Europe.
No, it won't. It never wanted to trample Europe. It's got enough.
I don't agree with you, Michaela. I'm sorry.
Nor do
I
I.
think Putin is an imperialist, and I think you're seeing things in an intelligent and interesting, but too much of a one-sided way, because
it's a different perspective. I'm trying to give a different perspective.
Two kind of mind, grasps, or worldviews, working ideologies, fighting, working against each other, east meets west, as I said, and I think Putin is an imperialist too, and I think that putting more imperialists in front of him, like Trump, isn't a good answer, because that's fighting fire.
Absolutely.
It's not an imperialist. It wanted its territories back.
I think that you would end up seeing Trump not disengaging, but engaging in a world war more than Kamala would have, because of people like Pompeo around him.
You want to take their
land. Evangelists.
Hey, you guys, we can't hear any of you because you're talking over each other.
Yeah. I just want to point out, this is so Mercury entering retrograde and Sag opposing Jupiter, its ruler, squaring Neptune, approaching that.
It's necessary to look at different perspectives.
I just challenge all of us to not over-identify with a certain type of thinking and to really be open about what
exactly
the truth.
And that's what I'm trying to say. Because we have been fed. I bought it when it first happened with Ukraine and everything. I bought it, and as I'm living in Europe, and it was very much fed to us. But though my partner at the time said, NATO has overstepped the mark with it, and I didn't know that. I hadn't heard anything about it, but because he'd followed the history of it consecutive for years, he knew that NATO
was at one time a part of Russia, and Putin decided he wanted to take back France. You would be okay with that?
I never said that, but I don't believe he is after that. We're assuming he's like Hitler and he would want to do that, but we're just assuming it. We have no proof of it.
But that's what he's doing.
That's all I'm saying. But he's not doing it. He's trying to take back now parts of Ukraine that were, he says, a part of Russia.
As if he was to take back parts of France.
It's not the same thing at all.
Or Poland.
I have to say it's not.
Right.
No, there's nothing to say he wants to take over Poland.
Yes, there is.
That's the point.
He's taking over Chechnya right now. And Georgia,
Yeah, but they were part of it. They were part of it. Yeah,
and that's not
the election in Grozny.
I'm not saying he should, but I'm saying also it's a overreaction to say that would just be the beginning if he did even manage to take that.
If you were Ukrainian and you lived in Ukraine, you would not be happy or okay with Russia taking over your country. Just because
especially if you're transgender or LGBT.
I'm saying if there'd been a diplomatic solution sought for, it might have been possible if NATO had
no diplomatic solution with Putin.
If NATO had pulled back, we don't know that. If NATO had pulled back and said,
Putin would take Ukraine,
and maybe Crimea would have to be and the Donbass. But it wasn't even deliberated. I'm saying it was just assumed. But all we've poured in for an assumption instead of actually trying to be diplomatic. It's cost billions,
that's
and it will be a failure. Ukraine could never win, and America has all this money. Europe is now on its knees. Germany is completely on its knees. Germany is going bankrupt because of the energy that's being caused, the energy shortfall caused by the sanctions on Russia and the loss of the Russian gas and everything. No thought was given to any of this. Europe is now in a very bad position, and it's not Russia taking it over now. We've done it ourselves. We are falling. And we've done it because we didn't think about the consequences of just going in there and being the big hero.
You're right. We should have just let Russia take Ukraine.
No, they weren't. There was nothing we could have said to them, no, you cannot take. Or we could have, we could have negotiated with what
just a
happened.
quick perspective.
The main thing they wanted was NATO pulling back.
Yeah, on that note, I think while I not in this life, I wasn't alive when it happened, but when Russia wanted to put nukes in Cuba, we had a little issue with that. Why? Because
sure,
right next door. And so I think that Russia wouldn't have a problem with us.
Yeah,
I want to hear Ryan.
Russia wouldn't have a problem with us putting,
that's
aiming bombs at them right next door. It's a double standard there. And so we have to,
correct.
It is a double standard there. So we Americans
because the missiles were pointed at America from Cuba.
That's my point. And so if we were to isolate just that point, and Lord knows it ain't isolated to one point. But on that note, I wouldn't want anybody putting, my next door neighbors putting bombs pointing towards my capital city right next door either.
Exactly. And NATO was.
And so that's the conversation that did not trickle into the American public. So
exactly. Or it didn't trickle into the British or the European either. It didn't.
And so
we're just completely
I'm not justifying. I'm not saying good, bad, but you should have. I'm saying just for perspective on that one point, not the other 15,000 points, but on that one point, if we are going to take some high moral, omniscient, transcendental, spiritual viewpoint, true or false, you want your neighbor to put missiles in their backyard pointing towards your house, you're going to say no.
Correct.
And so just on that point, we have to take a look at some of the things that Michaela is saying are worth consideration. What I'm seeing happen though, and this is again trying to take a outside perspective on this whole complex situation, is that we all have so much emotion wrapped up in, wait a second, there's an underprivileged population being subjugated by a potential dictator. That right there trumps everything. And so therefore we have to step in as the moral guardian of the world.
Yeah, but it might not have gone that far. The sad thing is, it might not have gone, if we tried negotiation first, it might not have gone to that point.
Why do you think that they didn't try to negotiate?
They didn't.
Because they didn't.
Why do you think that? I'm sure that they tried a lot.
Because I watch all the news stations and every bit of news, everything. I mean, because I do mundane astrology, and my partner was very big on that anyway. So I just followed everything.
What Michaela is saying in that regard is very correct. I mean, NATO should have backed down in the sense of not putting missile bases and Air Force bases in Ukraine and making it part of NATO in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it was
that would have been averted, that would have delegitimized Putin's campaign in many ways.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. And maybe he wouldn't have dared to try to take back territory at all.
Yep, because then Europe would have stepped in and been like, oh God, we're next. there's no basis for the provocation. But again, I'm not being necessarily pro-Russian here, but again, omniscient
I'm not
point of
being
view from
pro-Russian
their
either. I'm not. I'm
their
not being pro-Russian.
perspective.
I'm trying to, yeah.
Right, from their perspective, I mean, imagine anyone. I mean, even if you're the schoolyard bully, chances are you're the schoolyard bully because your father put out his cigar on your wrist. And so when we go back to, that, I cannot believe, I cannot believe that humans, even in consensus or even in individual, I'm gonna make people suffer and take over the world and have I think that every single human, and this is my belief, I'll own it as belief, but I believe that every single person wants to just simply be happy. Unfortunately, the methodology with which to get there is sometimes less than exemplary. And so as an astrologer, what I like to do with my clients is look for where the happiness is, look for where the joy is, look for where the expansion, the possibility, and how can we all get together, all of these things. None of those kinds of questions are currently being asked in consensual reality. And so my hope is that with the current crisis, current sociological crisis, let's call it, global sociological crisis, my hope is that, like Pluto's job is to do, that all of the junk and everything that we've suppressed, repressed, and denied comes up to the surface like clarifying butter so that we can go, and so that that's where
Pluto in air. Yeah, Pluto in Aquarius, it's air. There is a possibility, and Jupiter in Gemini is saying that too. Yes, there's the downside with, with disseminate,
So with that air, we need that healthy perspective where if we get, and we're all, myself included, we get so, I'm a Sagittarian. We get so Sagittarian. We get so, no, this is my life experience and the beliefs, my experience has shown me that this is what the truth is, Sagittarius. Why Sagittarius has to have that perspective that says that was just my experience. And so if we can all come to that point where it's like, oh, this is my experience. Hey, what's your experience? What's your reality? Oh, they didn't negotiate about NATO putting missiles in Ukraine, or they did a limited negotiation, or I don't know. Oh, well, perspective. Isn't that what Gemini is all about? Isn't that what an air sign is all about? To gain a healthy perspective on the reality. So Pluto comes into Aquarius saying, hey, maybe we can all take a look at every individual's collective reality. Is that going to bring some stuff to the surface? You bet it is. Are we going to go through a healing crisis? You bet we are. Is there a way through this healing crisis? You bet it is. What's it called? Listening. Okay, so everything's up at the surface. How can we have perspective?
I mean, you're much more diplomatic than me. I'm a Libran, but you're much more diplomatic than me. But that's a diplomatic way to put it, because it's true. It is basically just, let's look at the different perspective before leaping. And the trouble is, Europe and America have this idea of being the good guys with the big white hat on since World War II. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys. And we have and it's not to say there's not some truth in that, but we have taken it. We are so convinced of that. And that's what not seeing your shadow is collectively. We as the West have not seen our shadow. Our shadow was there even in World War II, but it was concealed. We didn't even see that there was a shadow going on with, Israel was a great idea. We know that, and Zionism, no problem with that. It was the way it was done, and it was used as a getting into the Middle East. It was used as a pawn against and it still is. That's the problem, and as a base for imperialism, and done in an imperialistic.
I mean, look at the way we divided. Look at the way we divvied up the countries after
Yes.
World War II. We didn't do a
Terrible.
good job of it, for sure.
Awful. So we weren't the good guys that we were painting ourselves up to be, but we were pumped up in Leo fashion. Leo, Pluto and Leo. We're the good guys, like that movie Old Country Old Men, which is brilliant. I love Cormac McCarthy's writing. It's so good. He's an American. Mythologist. He goes for mythology, but he uses classic American tradition to do it. It's fantastic. But No Country for Old Men is saying that the old man, the patriarchal way, is to think we're the hero, but we haven't ever been the hero. We've been imperialists, but we pretended to be the hero, and we're so convinced of that narrative that we then see, oh, the bad guy's doing something again, and we're going to rush in there and we're going to stop it, or we're going to, and we don't see we have become. It's like a sketch I put on YouTube, I put on Facebook, called The Baddies. It's Are We the Baddies? It's like these SS officers having invaded Russia. They're having a conversation. Oh, we've got skulls on our caps. What does that mean? Are we the baddies? So just a minute, something's wrong here. We've got skulls and we thought we were the good guys. So it's a very good lesson in perspective. That's Mitchell and Webb, comedy duo, British. But so are we baddies? Because you don't realize you are. And the consensus doesn't realize they are until they find they're in some foreign country and they just think, just a minute, we're being shot at. Are we the baddies? Because
So Pluto and
shadow. That's seeing the shadow.
So Pluto and Aquarius, seeing the shadow of what?
Leo.
Aquarius. The shadow of Aquarius. And so what's Aquarius? Aquarius, the will of the people. Aquarius, consensus reality. Aquarius, conformity. Aquarius, astrology. Liberalism. Pluto, the dark side of. So in our group think, in our collectivity, Aquarius, the darkness of what happens when we all are feeling all of these things comes to the surface, needing to be healed. So we're looking to heal our consensus reality. We're looking to heal and transform what happens when we all get together without a leader. Aquarius.
Right.
So the grassroots Aquarius is up for serious transformation right now. How that is going to happen, who knows? Will it happen? You bet. That's what Pluto is about.
Yeah.
So,
we probably won't see anything though. We probably won't see anything until Pluto gets to about the middle degrees of Aquarius.
I would agree, Marie.
I don't think so. I think we could see something. I think it's building already, especially with the problem in Israel. It's like Netanyahu's another. I think he's psychotic, frankly. He's certainly far right, as you know, Nia. And he's another far right extremist government. He is psychotic, I believe now. He's even thrown out his, Gallant, wasn't it? He's fired him because he started like Hitler did, he's at loggerheads with his comrades. So he is acting like he's lost the plot, but he is determined.
No, he has a plot like many maniacs do,
but
that is disconnected from, reality as we would like to perceive it and understand it, or the way we would like things to be.
No.
Because we know, but his government's integrity is above all, and there's a very big crisis point that is separate from the whole war that is festering in Israel, which is that the secular majority, slim majority, is paying the taxes, most taxes, and going to the army. A lot of young men in Israel have been more than 200 days over this year in the army. Can you imagine what that does to the economy and to the women, that are alone at home with the children who don't see
sure.
their dads. Okay,
True.
so
It's the
like,
Mars and Leo thing, the young
so
man.
Gallant
Yeah.
would not support, continuing the alliance with the ultra-Orthodox who are not contributing to taxes going to the army and get these huge consents historically.
Right.
So this
Right.
is, another point on which he fired him on, because he's a magician when it comes to politics. He's gotten away with things that no prime minister would have ever gotten away with.
He's like the
Can
anti-Trump,
we,
isn't he?
can we
Or
wait
Trump's
and,
the anti.
and discuss this at a later time? I think we're all getting tired and
Yeah.
and so
I'm sorry.
I think
Sure,
Ryan
yeah.
had one more point to make.
Yes,
Oh,
I
yeah.
do actually. Thank you. In closing,
Please deliberate.
in closing, bringing all of this together, it looks like we're living in quite a volatile time now, aren't we?
Yeah.
And so therefore, and this is again Ryan's filter of belief system, but therefore, it is up to each and every single one of us to do what we can to have as much positive effect and influence, being that more conscious or spiritually evolved, from that more conscious or spiritually evolved place that we astrologers like to consider ourselves as being in, to say, hey, again, bottom line, how can we all get along here? How can we all be happy here? And so if we can all, each individually as astrologers, and those of you astrologers or astrologists listening to this, if we can hold that as an intention amidst whatever else is going on out in the world, then we have a better than average chance of eliciting the best of all possible expressions of these archetypes. So last line here, like psychologist Fritz Perls said, consciousness is curative. That's what we need right now. So let's do
And
our
that means owning the shadow. It means not thinking that everything is going to be lovely. It's not unless we actually see the reality. The reality is there's some evil people in the world, and they always have been, and a lot of them are in charge.
True.
Which up to the people. Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah, and we can see this reflecting, as Ryan said, in these times with Pluto opposing Mars.
Yeah. The people are starting to see this, which is great, even if it's tough. Even the consensus is thinking something's wrong.
More will be revealed at a later time. We'll pick this up. We'll pick this up again after the new year or before.
Rousing debate.
Thanks,
Thank
you. Thanks,
I'm
Robin.
sorry.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Goodbye.
Namaste. Bye-bye.